Welcome, friends. I'm Anya, a homesteader in my late 70s, living near the frigid quiet of the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. The only sounds here are the crunch of snow underfoot and the deep howl of the wind. I keep this small, warm cabin, relying on the old ways. My hands are strong, capable of setting a snare or preparing a medicinal tea from the few hardy plants that survive the Arctic summer. You see me now, a quiet woman who keeps to herself, a white-haired figure against the vast, cold landscape. But these hands, worn by the fierce elements, once carried out a chilling, deliberate act of justice. They mixed the tea that sent my husband to his knees, knowing that his scientific experiment on our family had reached its irreversible final conclusion. My story begins in 1948 in a small, forgotten settlement nestled close to the tundra. My parents, simple trappers, raised me and my 4 siblings on the land. We learned to live by the rhythms of the seasons. My mother taught me the lore of the land, which berries brought sleep, and which roots brought a quick, blinding fever. Simple knowledge, yet it became the blueprint for my survival. It was at a local community gathering in the settlement, after the long trapping season, that I first saw Dr. Alistair Finch. He was an outsider, a man of sharp angles and round gold-rimmed glasses, who carried a leather-bound journal and spoke of academia and human potential. He showed particular interest in me, a strong, healthy girl, commenting to my father that I must possess exceptional genetic resilience. I felt a profound chill, as if he weren't looking at a person but an object of study. Alistair won my family's trust with small strategic kindnesses, always observing, always writing in his journal. On my 15th birthday, he convinced my parents to let me join him for a proper education in Seattle. My parents, blinded by the dream of a better life for me, accepted. I left the warmth of my family's cabin and climbed into Alistair's vehicle, believing I was heading toward a bright future. We never reached Seattle. After a few days' drive, we took a remote track that led us to an isolated property, a large, heavily secured wooden house with a suspicious-looking annex. That night, Alistair dropped the facade of the benevolent mentor. He was a disgraced experimental psychologist, he claimed, expelled for methods too advanced. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying intensity, and told me I wouldn't be a student here. I would be part of something much greater, something that would revolutionize science. I quickly learned that Alistair's definition of revolution was simply the systematic, cold-blooded torture of the mind. The house and the isolated clearing became my cage. For a brief time, Alistair played the teacher, educating me in math and history, nurturing me just enough to create a baseline for his real work. But he was a master of control. When I was 16, he caught me talking to a delivery boy outside the perimeter. The punishment was immediate and severe. 3 days locked in a damp, pitch-black basement, surviving only on water and stale bread. At 17, Alistair announced that we would be married. It was not a question, but a dictated sentence. Alone and completely isolated, I became Mrs. Anya Finch. It was after the wedding that the true sick project began. He no longer hid his intentions. He was studying the limits of human endurance to trauma inflicted by loved ones. The initial experiments were simple, yet clinical and humiliating. Sleep deprivation, extreme dietary changes, and detailed logging of my emotional and physical reactions. Then came the children. First Elias in 1968, followed by Katya, Peter, and little Varya. Alistair saw them not as human beings, but as new equipment for his studies, a second generation to expand the experiment. I loved my 4 babies more than the frozen earth beneath us, but to Alistair, they were merely subjects in training. When Elias was 6, the worst phase of the project began. Alistair gathered us in the main sitting room and, with the cold precision of a medical lecture, announced that I would be the primary subject and that our children would be the stimulus agents. They, my innocent children, would be taught to inflict controlled, painful stimuli on their own mother. My 6-year-old Elias was the first. He looked at his father, then at me, trembling. "I don't want to hurt Mama," he cried. Alistair's eyes turned to ice. "Refusal is not an option, son. It's science. If you refuse, I will document your reaction to the stimulus instead." And so it began. My own son forced to pinch, to pull, to apply small controlled shocks with a crude device Alistair had built. The physical pain was terrible, but it was nothing compared to the sight of my children's souls being carefully, scientifically broken by their own father. The experiments became a structured horror, happening 3 times a week. Alistair was obsessive about precision, meticulously noting every reaction. Peter, my 3rd child, was the most openly rebellious, trying to sabotage the sessions. Alistair punished him by starvation and isolation. Katya, the oldest daughter, adopted a terrifying coping mechanism. She became cold and robotic, carrying out her father's orders with clinical detachment, only to cry herself to sleep later. They were all becoming smaller versions of him, detached scientists in the face of suffering. In the early years, my own response was chaotic and raw. I screamed, I pleaded, I even tried to attack Alistair in his sleep. But each time, my outburst only provided him with new data. After one severe reaction, he coolly noted, "Extreme anger completely altered your pain resistance patterns." Fascinating. It was this observation that changed me forever. I realized my uncontrolled pain was just fuel for his research. If I wanted to survive, I had to beat him at his own game. I had to transform my burning maternal rage into something he couldn't detect and study: cold, calculated patience. Externally, I became compliant, resigned. Alistair, disappointed at first, eventually concluded he had achieved the complete breaking of the subject's will. But internally, my will was stronger than ever. I focused on breathing exercises my mother taught me, separating my consciousness from the physical agony. This allowed me to endure the pain while clearly observing everything: Alistair's routines, the paths through the forest, the keys on his ring, and most importantly, the reaction of my children. I saw the glimmer of humanity still fighting in my eldest, Elias. He was 13 now, and despite years of conditioning, I noticed small, furtive looks of guilt after he executed his father's cruel orders. It was on him I focused my silent strength. If I was to escape this frozen hell, I couldn't just run. Alistair would find us. I needed to destroy him,
not just flee from him. And for that, I needed two things: the key to his freedom, the black journals where he documented his crimes, and the courage of my son.
The black-covered journals, meticulously filled with his clinical notes, were Alistair's most treasured possession. The key to both his legacy and his eventual conviction. He kept them locked away, constantly reviewing and organizing them. In 1978, when Elias was 13, I finally trusted him. One night, while Alistair slept, Elias crept into my room. "Mom," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "What we're doing is wrong, isn't it?" The dam of years of suppressed emotion nearly broke, but I held firm. "Yes, son," I replied, holding his hands. "It is very wrong. Your father, he's not well. We must stop it." In the following weeks, I prepared Elias. We would escape during Alistair's next planned 3-day trip to Anchorage. We planned to take the old, battered farm truck and use the back roads to reach the nearest town, Pine Bluff, 25 miles away, where we would find the police. But escaping wasn't enough. Alistair would simply hunt us down, or worse, find a new family to torment. My calculated anger demanded a final accounting. I wanted him to feel firsthand the impotence he had so carefully imposed on us. I turned to the knowledge my mother had passed down. During Alistair's brief absences, I secretly began cultivating a specific plant I knew from my childhood, the Arctic winterberry. Its crushed leaves, in high enough concentration, produced an extract that caused temporary full-body paralysis without affecting consciousness or the ability to feel pain. I refined the extract over months, even testing small, non-fatal doses on myself to perfectly calculate the timing. The plan was clear. I would incapacitate Alistair, carry him to his own private laboratory, strap him to the very chair he used to torture me, and conduct my own experiment. I didn't plan to kill him. That would have been too merciful. I wanted him to live, to spend the rest of his life in prison, marked forever by the memory of the night the roles reversed, when the guinea pig became the scientist. The opportunity came sooner than expected when Alistair announced an escalation. He would begin applying direct, painful stimuli to Katya and Peter. We couldn't wait for his trip. It was a cold, typical October night in 1978. Alistair sat at his desk, compulsively reviewing his notes. At 9:43 p.m., I quietly slipped 3 drops of the Arctic winterberry extract into his evening tea. Elias was hidden, knowing only the escape plan. Within 10 minutes, Alistair's hand trembled, dropping his pen. He tried to speak, to call for me, but his vocal cords were useless. His body slid to the floor, terrified and completely paralyzed. Yet his mind was horrifyingly lucid. "You can hear everything, but you can't move or speak." I knelt beside him, explaining with the same clinical calm he used, "Just as I felt so many times in your chair. You won't die. That would be unscientific. We need complete data." With a strength born of 15 years of bottled rage, I dragged my inert husband down the hall to the room he called the laboratory. I strapped him to the chair. I turned on the lights, activated his own recording device, and began to organize the instruments. "Today," I announced, adjusting the recording microphone, "you will finally contribute personally to the advancement of science." For a full hour, I conducted my final experiment. I applied low-intensity, painful stimuli with his devices, narrating each response exactly as he would. I observed the pupil dilation, the instant sweating, the tears running down his face. "Fascinating," I commented, echoing his favorite word. Subject B demonstrates low pain tolerance, suggesting a lack of prior experience as a recipient. When I finished, I injected him with a second dose to ensure 12 more hours of paralysis. I leaned close to his ear. "Each note, each record you took, thinking you were proving your theories, will be used to condemn you. The irony is almost scientific, don't you think?" Elias and I took the journals, the recorder, and slipped away into the silent, cold night, leaving 3 children behind with a silent promise to return. We drove until we reached Pine Bluff, presented the evidence to the sheriff, and within hours, Alistair Finch was found strapped to his own chair, waiting for justice. I didn't find peace until I knew that my torturer, the scientist who turned our children into machines, finally understood the true meaning of pain. I taught him that even the smallest, most broken subject can become the most devastating force for justice. If a heartbroken mother in the middle of a frozen wasteland can find her strength, what power are you holding back today?